What's up YouTube? Today we're going to look at some KYOSHO Nitro engines from some of the models that we've known and loved over the years. Have a little in-depth look in and around them and generally check them out for your resto project, or if you're looking to start a project or get an old car, this is what you might be looking at or looking for. Right, first we've got the GX12 and GX15. These were ubiquitous in the 1/10 scale Nitro cars from KYOSHO. Mainly this in the Pureten Alpha. Then you had these in some cars like the Inferno 10, the TR15 buggy, 1/10 scale four-wheel drive, and a couple of monster trucks, Mad Force I think, and possibly some other models. And slightly different versions of this were in the Japanese models, the Spider and FWO 3 and 4s. These, as you can see side by side, are very similar. I think crankcases are the same. You've just got a different stroke or bore on the piston. The main external difference is the large cooling head on the 15. And obviously the internal difference is one being a 0.15 cubic inch displacement and a 0.12 cubic inch displacement. Otherwise carburetors were the same, needles were the same, throttles were the same, flywheels were the same, back plates were the same. So if you're just looking for a straightforward boost in power and torque and your car already had one of these in it, keep a lookout for a GX15. These were pretty easy to start, quite good, well running engines, good mid-range, not overly powerful, but on the whole a decent engine to get into Nitro with from KYOSHO. Now in contrast to those, in the bigger KYOSHOs you had a big block, and as you can see side by side, obviously they are just a bigger block. Now these were 0.21s, GX21 this was, and you got a GX28 as well, which again is a similar engine with the different conrod and piston in it. These were found ubiquitously in the Inferno series, so a very popular engine in the Inferno and a few of the monster trucks. A long running engine as well. So I think this was in early versions of it were in the USA 1 monster truck, and then the future ones after that with the solid axles. Very similar in design, but a bit more conventional here with the slide throttle, conventional needle setup. What's unconventional is the exhaust port, so that's unique to KYOSHO, that shape and flange. Backplate was the same across 10ths and 1/8, so you can use the pull starts from either. I mean, pull starts is an item that a lot of people will be looking for, so to note, you can actually use the same pull start overall size, but there is an internal difference, which is this one-way bearing is a lot bigger because it has a very chunky shaft there, which will measure. You can check it. So that's an 8mm shaft on that. That is a huge rear bearing. 17 on that for the 8mm shaft. These had a 6mm shaft and a 14mm rear bearing. From a pull start, look at this, 14. So this is a GX small block pull start, and the big blocks had a slight same external body but slightly internal difference there, but you could probably adapt it if you found a one-way bearing that was a 14 to 8 or vice versa. But the GX 1/10 scale pull starts are much more commonly available. Here's the bearing from it actually. So it's got the 6mm internal, 14 external. Let's do a quick weigh-in. So small blocks weighing in at like 260. There's some differences, had a clutch bell, 228, something like that. And a big block, obviously a lot more metal to it, a lot bigger. 435, so about 200 grams more. But I mean, the power differential for that 200 grams is really major. Quick view of exhausts. So this is the type of flange you get on the GX, the big block, to correspond with that. Not exactly the best port matching condition there. Probably a bit of performance to be had by transitioning those two port shapes. And that's how they came, with the nice quiet silencer, dual chamber on the big block, which I highlight in my keeping Nitro quiet video. It's one of the quietest, best flowing silencers you can get, is a KYOSHO big block one from a GX21 or 28. On the small blocks you had the dustbin type muffler, quite a small chamber. This in comparison had a very good port matching shape. These flow alright, quite quiet these, especially with the rubber stinger pipe directed to the ground, make that a very quiet running engine altogether. They're not particularly highly tuned, they don't rev particularly high, but this combo setup is pretty good if you want to run a Nitro quietly. And KYOSHO's upgrade system for the small block engines was this. Quite a thick alloy tuned pipe section there, offset flange, which you can move this part the opposite way round to configure it in different orientations. So that's what they offered on their higher performance cars that came with the GX12 or 15 engine. Quick size difference for packaging. You got 76mm of height on the smallest one, 93 on that, that's cooling head, and 106 on this. So that's your packaging. What's different about a lot of other Nitro engines and the KYOSHO series is they all had a direct chassis mounting system. So these 4 bolts can just bolt straight to a flat plate, the chassis in these cases. But it makes it a very convenient option for doing transplants and swaps and using different, if you want to use this engine elsewhere. And the same for the small blocks. The downside with this is that these small M3 threaded holes, it's quite a small screw for that, for how tight you kind of need to get them in order to not vibrate loose. So they often would get rounded, or I come across a lot of damage in those holes. People use the wrong type of screw. It needs to be an M3 machine threaded screw. It's best to use a slightly longer one, but not too long, and thread lock to get that to stay in place. But yeah, with any M3 size screw, trying to do it up tight, you are going to round them out, have rounded ones, and I see that as a common issue with these blocks. Something to note on these KYOSHO engines is they all use this needle roller bearing clutch type mounting with a circlip or screw on the front, but they use that long, weak needle roller bearing in a plastic cage, which uses the bell itself as the outside race, and that quickly develops a lot of play and wears out. So I know there's a bit of a cheapy rubbish aspect about these, and that's the same on these small blocks. And as the GX21 big block, and is just completely out of spec for the duty on this. I mean, this has a common play that's not even that bad, but that's sort of as good as they get, and you can see that movement. It's a bit rubbish. I'll show you one of these bearings. Looks like this. What's this? Some fluff on it. So plastic cage. Look at that wonky needle in there. Wonky needle. Yeah. That's how it sits. They're just rubbish, really. Let's put this on. This bell hasn't even been that worn out, if you look, and we'll see how much play it has on something like that. So that's as good as they get, really. Not great. You could change to another setup off another manufacturer's engine for improvements there. So there you have it. Let me know your experience with these. Some of the most common and prolific nitro engines ever made and available from KYOSHO, one of the biggest manufacturers. That's a brief overview. They do have newer versions, newer things. A lot of them are based around the same architecture. Yeah, add in the comments what you think. KYOSHO.